The School of Fiction. Hello, everybody. This is Matt from the School of Fiction channel, and I'm welcoming a group of authors to talk about a topic that we all care about very deeply, and that is self-editing for fiction writers. So let's all go around and introduce ourselves, and then I'll hand it over to our moderator. Parker, start us off.
Sure. Hello, I'm Parker Lyons. I'm the author of Rebel Planet, a young adult science fiction novel that just came out last Tuesday, December 2nd. So that is my debut novel, but I am also a co-founder of an indie publishing company called Midnight Carnival.
And we have Jennifer Jaxxon-Louis.
Hi, everyone. I'm the author of One Vermilion May Live. It's a young adult sci-fi thriller / dark comedy. And it is basically the Hunger Games meets Sons of Anarchy and the Brady Bunch. Go figure. So that is my book. And I'm also coming out with another one very soon called What Happened in the Janitor's Closet. And it is a collection of short stories I've been working on for many years. I'm excited to get that out to everyone. And I'm editing it right now. So very appropriate.
Okay, also editing right now is Aspry Jones.
Thank you for having me. I'm Aspry Jones, author of Protectors of the Light Crown. Just in case you thought I was lying, here's the proof. I am a full-time writer. I spent 25 years in broadcast television, and I gave that up. And now I'm doing what I really want to do, and that's write books. I live in North Carolina, and I'm enjoying it here. It's the weather is a lot better here than it is in New York City.
Let me say that again. Hey, please meet Ezra Barany.
Hi, I was born a dehydrated horse, but they didn't give me enough water, so now I'm a human. I've written a thriller series, the Jewish thriller series, The Torah Codes, like Bullets Aren't Kosher, 36 Righteous, Serial Killers Hit List, that sort of thing. And yeah, I'm loving it here. I love these authors. They're great. Great.
And then our moderator today is a multi-genre author, Tycho Dwelis.
Hi, nice to meet everyone officially. I'm Tycho. I am a writer for all ages. I've written as young as middle grade and as old as adult. I've published 11 titles as of this year, some of which have won awards. I'm also aware of many hats, so I have a master's in publishing, and I'm also an EFA certified editor as well. And this year, my biggest exciting thing that's happened is that I've opened my publishing company. It is a micro hybrid press called Liminal House Press, and I'm going to be focusing on diverse and marginalized voices that don't typically get seen in major big five publishing. But this is my most recent work. It is, if I can get this to focus, a Dungeons and Dragons inspired vampire fantasy. I like to have fun with my books. I don't treat anything very seriously here. I am a silly person, but I'm very excited to talk to everybody about a topic that I know a lot of authors deal with. And I've gotten a lot of questions about it recently because I've opened up my own press and I offer a la carte editor services to a lot of people. And that is, how do we effectively self-edit as authors? Most people know that we're not exactly rolling in cash 24/7. That's just not something that authors really have access to. And so sometimes we have to make hard decisions between whether or not we actually can afford all of the editing passes that we want, or where do we cut corners? How do we effectively self-edit ourselves so that way, even if we do have to miss certain editing stages, how do we get our books to the point where they don't look nasty when they get out actually into the world, whether you're independently publishing or you're sending your stuff off to an agent? So I thought I would start. It seems like most of the questions that we have are kind of one big one is, okay, how do we start as editors, and self-editing versus paying for editing? And then a lot of the other ones were more specifics about how to check yourself as an author, specifics like dialogue tags, head hopping, showing versus telling, verb changes, things like that. So I thought we'd start off with like the bigger picture first, which is, how do you find a good professional editor? What are the benefits or cons of self-editing versus pro editing? Should we be using AI to edit things like that? So I don't know how we want to do this, but I was thinking about potentially just asking everybody's experiences first and foremost. Do you prefer to go and find editors yourselves? Where have you had success finding good editors to edit your work? And what things do you feel like you can handle self-editing as authors yourselves?
How about ladies first?
Okay. Well, um, I have paid different people to edit. One person tried to take my money and didn't do anything, and didn't even seem to know my whole manuscript is written in verse. I'm like, how do you not know that you read it, right? And I've had different situations where I've tried to hire people and I really thought they knew what they were doing. One person volunteered to do a developmental editing. It was just straight critical. I felt like it was like a knock to my self-esteem a bit. Lately in my current one, I've been experimenting with using ChatGPT. The feedback it gives me is interesting, and I don't always agree with it, but I've asked it to like generate a list of things I could tighten up or generate a list of edits. But I also like to kind of look online to see what other people say you should look for. And I just kind of think it can get really, really overwhelming. I just kind of go, one thing at a time. But I think it's important to start with like, top down, like more broad, the whole story structure. And, kind of go to the line edit and then, the copy edit and all of that and proofreading. But I've done a lot of it myself. I've had other people also. In this novel right now, I hired several sensitivity readers an editor because I have a lot of edgy content I've never really written before. I have some skinheads and I have a lot of like LGBTQ plus issues and I just wanted to make sure I was really sensitive. And so I learned a lot as I went and just getting suggestions from other authors is very, very helpful. But I don't really have like one specific. I wish I had a lot of money to hire, all the other ones I need, and that's the truth. I really don't right now. So I'm doing what I can. It's hard to know what you should really spend your money on overall. You know, so that's where I am right now.
Well, if you don't mind, let me try to see if I can set the stage here. When I was looking for my someone to edit my book, it says here that a professional editor, thanks to Google, this information, it costs anywhere from $1,000 to $10,000 or more, depending heavily on the type of editing you're talking about, from developmental, line, copy, editing, proofreading, so forth and so on. And also the book's length is taken into account, the word length, and saying that here that the common rates go for 2 cents to 5 cents per word. So I drank that Kool-Aid when I went looking for an editor, and that's what I was expecting. I was expecting to pay about $5,000, and I just needed an editor, and I didn't. I never looked for one. I was in this writing group that I saw something on Facebook. Someone in the writing group had posted, "Wow, this editor really knocked my book out of the park. I really appreciate her, and she's local." So I was like, "Oh, all right. I guess I'll contact her and see if she's worth my time." And we got along pretty well, and I hired her to edit my book, and I ended up being $5,000 in the hole. But she did help me. She helped me fix a lot of problems that I didn't know I had, and hopefully I won't repeat those problems with the book too. Um, uh, it's a shame that I'm not going to be able to use her a second time because I'm not tossing $5,000. One of the reasons why I wanted to be a part of this forum was to find out not how I could take shortcuts and save money, but how I could replace one method with another, basically.
I'll jump in. I have never had a professional editor. I used beta readers, and by that I mean the type. When I say beta reader, I mean someone. Some of them were other authors where we exchanged, and I edited their books, they edited mine. and which I can do because I have an MFA basically, so that makes me technically qualified for it. And also, I was fortunate to meet some people who are just good readers and editors who were able to point out stuff to me. And while one such person isn't enough, when you have several different ones collectively, it came out to where it was pretty cool. And I since have looked more at professional editors, but the issue is still the expense. I don't have $5,000 to drop even once. For me, I work full time as a teacher, so everything that I'm doing is on a shoestring by exchanges of services and stuff like that, trading help and that kind of thing. Maybe a professional editor would be nice. I certainly have met some professional editors since I started this channel that I wish I could hire. But I'm a person who doesn't have any budget for it at all. So the more self-editing that I can do, the better. And that being said, I have missed stuff in my published books, which, every time I see it, I'm like, oh no, that again.
Yeah.
Yeah, that hurts because I'm in that boat too. I've seen a couple of things, and I was like, oh my God, I told myself not to do that, and there it is, and it's there forever.
I have the most embarrassing error if I can jump in. My math colleague caught a math error in my book. Like I think I changed something and I forgot I changed it. It was just like a simple addition. She texted me, she's like, you add on page forward, whatever. I'm like, oh my God, I went right to Amazon and I changed the manuscript. Like that's beyond embarrassing. Come on, because my book is very STEM based, so you can't have math errors in the book.
I can jump in next and talk about my experience. So, one of the reasons I started with an independent publishing company with two other authors is that we both wanted to be, or all three of us wanted to be invested in each other's success. And so we basically have a team of authors, writers, where we are kind of co-editing each other's works. So I usually go through about 4 or 5 drafts myself, self-editing my own book. So start with first draft is just blah, just throw it all out there. I don't care if I use the same word twice in the same sentence. It's just telling myself my own story. And then start to do the structural changes, what's missing in the story, what needs to be taken out, because it's all about efficiency. I don't want to spend a lot of time editing a chapter that's not going to be there. And I'll go through those layers of editing, go from structure story to punching up dialogue to just the music of the words and if they're playing right in my ear. And get to the point where then I might spend some time on the little details like grammar, punctuation, head hopping, that sort of thing. So it won't be until 4 or 5 drafts that I give it to my partners who are kind of like very well trained editors, beta readers. So they can catch a lot of stuff as well. They'll come back. I'll make probably some more changes. They'll provide story recommendations, point out things that may make the story better, but they'll also point out typos, the little stuff. And then usually after I go through that process, I'll do a couple more drafts and then I'll find an editor. And I since it is my debut novel, this is the first time I went out and got an editor, but I found an editor on Fiverr. And I did research a couple of candidates. I didn't just go for the cheapest. I didn't go for the first one I looked at. I spent some time looking at options. And what I wanted to find was an editor that showed a level of professionalism that I expected. So they had a website. They had people who had on Fiverr or on their website or on Facebook provided reviews, feedback saying I used this person, they were great, they provided a lot of insight. and then also the flexibility to meet me where I was. So I had already gone through 6 drafts. I'd had a couple of beta readers already. I didn't need like a really detailed story structure edit. I more or less needed some proofreading. And so for a Fiverr editor to do proofreading, find the things that I've missed because I've read my manuscript 100 times already, that only costs like $250 for that.
Yeah.
So I got a really good value because I had a good team of authors and beta readers that we were all invested in each other's success. And then finding that editor on Fiverr, I could do it for a very reasonable price.
Well, that's where I got my sensitivity readers. I guess you could call them beta readers too. I had 3 people on there that were amazing. And very reasonable asking. So I found that was a good resource.
From my experience, I followed the 3 rules of self-editing. Unfortunately, nobody knows what they are. There is something like the best step that a person can take is to first marry an editor, preferably Beth Barany. Now, there may be like 1 or 2 of you who can't do that. And in that case, it's actually what I really like about what some of you like, and Aspry said, I hope I pronounced your name right. Is it Aspry or Aspry? Please tell me now.
Aspry.
Aspry, thank you. Okay. All right. Thank you. Yeah. Those Beth was, is Aspry there? Oh, okay. So yeah. So so anyway, it's the surrounding is blurred, but okay. So okay.
Hey guys.
Okay. So yeah. So
Hi, Beth.
but you can but the goal is the same, to find people who can critique your work. So there are many good things about being in a writer's group. And one of them is not only that you get your work critiqued by many people, but also you get the accountability to get it done. And that goes, I think, Parker, you were saying, just get it done. And turn off that editing hat when you get it done. So once it's done, then you can put on the editing hat. And then after having your work looked at and reviewed, you might notice a pattern. It's like there's some things that you tend to do often that can be fixed, and you can like make a mental note of what those things are. Like I said, I usually wrote he talked or something. No, he walked. I would say he walked over there or something, and he strode over there instead. You can use that instead. And then another problem is that my openings don't really describe the setting much. All these things I kept a note of, and then for me, because the whole point is everyone is different in what they need to edit. And so if you make your own little list of things, tendencies that you have, you can go into your self-editing mode and follow that list. So I go through, I find all those walking moments, I find all those opening moments, I find those places where there should be description that I don't have. And I love what was said. I think someone mentioned beta readers. And so that's really helped me as well. For once I'm done with editing, the best that I think it's ready, and then I have my beta readers look at it and give me feedback. those particular beta readers are more people who just love the genre and are readers, rather than being necessarily authors that know how to write good fiction. But at least they can tell me, I have them say, like, what did you like about it? What did you want more of? And what would make it a 5-star review for you?
Exactly. It's a good idea to send a question list to not
Yeah.
to beta readers, also to editors, but certainly to beta readers, because you know what specifically you're worried about. And
Right.
sometimes they may not know how to give you any feedback without that guidance if they aren't professionals in the same sense as a paid editor is.
Well, you know, the whole beta reader thing that might need a forum unto itself, because
Yeah, absolutely.
that is where I failed miserably. And no through no fault of my own, by the way. Getting people to read your book, or hold on, getting people to say they'll read your book is really easy. You know,
Yes.
I got about 10 takers, and one of them actually did it and gave me the feedback I needed, as well as stroking my ego, saying that, oh my God, you're going to win like 5 awards for this. And so, see, her being the only one who read the book and gave me feedback, I just believed her. And I went with it. And, you know, it was kind of a drag too, because people will say that they'll read your book and you never hear from them again. You send it to them and they ghost you, and they just kind of drop off the face of the earth and never say a thing. And you know, if you're new at this, that's fine. And you maybe you didn't like it, and you're trying not to drop that kind of a bomb on a new writer like myself. And but you know, you understand though, however, that that's the point to all this. You know, I'm trying to get some feedback on, you know, what works and what doesn't. So the whole beta reader thing, man, the people I paid to do it, yeah, the job was done. But wow, you know, I'm glad you had better success than I did.
Yeah,
Yeah.
not anyone for free. I mean, I tried recently, someone said, hey, let's trade in beta read, and then he disappeared. I was like, where'd you go? So I don't
Right. So
know. Hard to
that's
gauge.
Why
why
you don't trade reviews with people.
Not
some
I've
reviews, but
never,
a
every
beta
time
read.
I did a review trade, I did the review and the other person didn't.
that's why usually what we do is we find 20 beta readers to get like 5 or 6 done. And then also the last caveat I put after my list of questions is, please reply honestly. I would rather fix the problems now before publishing than get bad reviews on Amazon, so that they feel more comfortable saying bad things about my work.
Yeah,
I like,
absolutely.
Even
sorry. I like the idea of presenting with your manuscript to beta readers with a list of questions, because it's an invitation to get feedback. I could see some hesitation, like, oh, this is my friend or somebody I know at work or whatever, and I don't want them to feel like I didn't like a book or it needed improvement. They're just hesitant to give negative criticism. But if you're inviting it,
mhm.
and saying that's what I really want. And I love how you framed it of like, what would make this a 5-star book? Because people can
Yeah.
say, I liked it, it was fine. In their head, they're thinking it's a 3-star, but you're giving them the invitation to say, you know what, if you just did this and this and added this to the story, I would really like it. And that's valuable feedback.
I remember answering that question a couple of times because I read several of Ezra's books in the preliminary stages.
Yeah.
Deborah's Number is one of them that I read. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that all of these are valid points, and I definitely wanted to touch on, as I think I am the only professional editor here who has done this a couple of times at least in the room, and the major reason I'm definitely on board with Parker in regards to like finding that author support. The major reason I started my own publishing company is because I'm sick of seeing authors getting scammed. I'm so sick of it because I find so many authors, like Aspry was saying, you're expecting to pay $5,000. In my humble opinion, you should never, ever, ever pay more than like $2,000 to $3,000 to edit your book total. That's total. And that's if you need massive amounts of edits. And so if an editor is ever asking you for just one pass of editing for anything more than that, it's very likely that they're trying to scam you out of money, which is unfortunate. My favorite resource to double check to see what people's rates should be is going to the Editorial Freelancers Association website. Those guys are the authority on what editors' rates should be in the US right now. They update it very frequently. That's where I got my certification from. And they have a lovely table of all different types of editing or other types of freelance services that you could possibly need or want, with all of the prices as well as the range. You know, what is the low end for somebody who's just starting out in editing, and how low is that to what is the most expensive type of editing that you could possibly look for. But these guys are fantastic, and it gives you a good baseline as an author to be able to advocate for yourself, because I do think that it is, you know, really unfortunate that we need our books edited. Even though I myself am a professional editor, I still need to go hire other editors, you know, but like a few people have mentioned, doing those writing trades can be critical to your success. And if you can find somebody else that's willing to either read your book and they have experience in writing, or they have experience in reading your genre, for either a trade or at a steep discount, that is a great way to still get your work edited by somebody without just putting it out there. Because the biggest trap I see authors fall into, and I've definitely seen indie books that have unfortunately hit this speed bump, is that they think that they can 100% self-edit it themselves and not get anybody else to look at it. And then what happens is you got a book that's like 99% typos and you just can't read it, and it's like, it's really, really bad. And you know that the author has a good heart and the story is probably there, but you literally cannot get past the wall of typos there. So that being said, I definitely also love what Parker mentioned as well about, you know, really figuring out what your pipeline is for editing so that you can avoid as heavy costs as humanly possible. And then also too, Ezra touched on this a little bit as well, knowing what mistakes that you make often and frequently, because the more feedback you get, the more likely you are to catch those things. But then also knowing that you can pretty much do a developmental edit yourself. I very rarely would suggest people to go and get a developmental edit for their work unless it's a genre that they've never written before, or that you just don't read. Like I, for example, do not write a lot of romances, and so I wrote one for the Novel November month this year. When I go to publish it, I'm probably going to get a developmental editor for it just to make sure the pacing is right, it fits genre expectations, all of that stuff. But if you love fantasy, for example, you read a lot of fantasy and you know where to get those story beats from, you know what you want out of a fantasy book, you're probably going to be okay, and you don't need to pay like $8,000 to have somebody edit your fantasy book in that way. And then you can focus your time more on the things that actually matter, the line editing, getting your prose really, really tight, making sure your characters have wonderful, compelling dialogue. And then if you have to, which I would recommend, I always recommend to everybody, just hire a proof editor. They tend to be more on the cheaper end of things. And that would be, if you had to get one edit, that would be the one that I would pick. So that way you just can avoid having a book that is, you know, filled with typos. But otherwise, I think that there are definitely tools that authors can use out there. I know we talked a little bit about AI, and this is just my own personal preference. I would personally avoid using AI to edit at all. And this is from a technology standpoint as well as from a market standpoint. And I can talk about both of those things. From a professional standpoint, the AI, unfortunately, the way that AI works is that it is a homogenized, I guess, amalgamation of a lot of different fiction. They have taken in a bunch of different books, fed it to this algorithm, and effectively the AI is doing its best to guess what it thinks that you want. And so unfortunately, because the internet is filled with kind of trash Twilight fan fiction, that's like the majority of the writing on the internet, that's what this thing was trained on. Now, does it mean that it 100% will give you back bad ideas most of the time? Maybe not. It may give you back things that are good editorial suggestions, but the risk that you run is that the AI itself is also trained on a very specific voice. So ChatGPT, for example, has a personality, so to speak. The coders are giving it a voice that it wants the chatbot to use. And so when it does edits for your work, it will default to that voice. And so you run the risk of overwriting your author voice with the AIs. And that's resulted in a bunch of different books I've seen all over the internet where you can tell that either one, they were written by AI, or two, they were edited by AI, because they all sound like they were written by the same person. And so you can lose that spark, that sparkle and that personality that makes your work yours. So from a technical standpoint, that's why I would avoid it. But then also too, from a market standpoint, I saw a Publishers Weekly article that was written in October of this year. And a survey that they did recently has shown that 70% of all readers are now deliberately avoiding any books that have any AI in them at all. So if you edit them, if you have writing in them, or if you use book covers that are generated by AI. So you may potentially lose out on a large market share and sales if you do that. That being said, there are some tools that I always recommend that authors use that they have some AI features. I just don't use them. But Grammarly is like my #1 favorite one. If you can't pay for a proof editor, Grammarly is pretty good about catching a bunch of weird stuff. It's not going to be perfect. Like if you have fantasy characters or sci-fi characters who have really bizarre names, it's going to flag the characters' names every single time. And unfortunately, you're not going to be able to get around that. But if you've like missed a comma, or if you have like double punctuation on accident, or you've misspelled a word, or you've used the wrong homonym in certain spaces, that's a great way to get your edit done without paying any money, because Grammarly is free, which is a super nice thing to use. The important thing to remember there is that Grammarly is mostly meant for academic writing, and so unfortunately it too can kind of eat your style if you like using, like for me, I love saying, having sentences that are like, it was dirty and dank and musty, and I won't use any commas, and I'll use and because that's just a stylistic choice that I have, and Grammarly just freaks out. It says, no, this is not right. You have too many ands, and there's not enough commas, and I'm like,
I do that all the time.
This is a stylistic choice. Leave me alone, Grammarly. Leave me alone. So, so you can kind of pick your battles with these tools. But yeah, definitely knowing what you need, and then trying to, as best as you can, form those communities. Like I love what Ezra mentioned about getting in those author groups, or Jennifer, you mentioned the good beta readers too, like getting those people that are in your corner, that aren't your mom, that aren't your best friend, that aren't going to just be like, I love this book. This is my favorite book I've ever read, because I can't give my mom anything. She's like, I don't know. I like everything you make. I'm like, okay, I'm glad that you enjoyed this, but this feedback isn't really helpful. So that being said, that's all my 2 cents about it. I am also, I love the tip too, to go to Fiverr, vet your editors. If you do go to find editors on the internet, there are a lot of scammers out there now as well who will say that they're professional editors, and literally all they're doing is copying the text into ChatGPT and then editing your book. And that's a huge risk that we run as authors now, which is really annoying when you're trying to get somebody to give you genuine and honest feedback about your work, and then they're effectively not putting in any work and then just collecting your money. So having those good reviews, or having people that that worked with the person before, can help you avoid that. And if they look sketchy, then like, bye. Like I'm not going to worry about it. Yeah, just get them out of there, and Fiverr. Fiverr's a good place to go. I personally also sell my services on Fiverr. I've gotten one really good client off of Fiverr, which is great. But otherwise, all I get messages is a bunch of bots. Like a bunch of bots message me all the time, so I don't really get a lot of clients on Fiverr. Mostly, I get hired via word of mouth, which is pretty cool. But
let me help you with the ands. If you say say noun and noun and noun, that's actually has a name. It's called polysyndeton.
Oh, see, I'm like, look, that's the beauty.
Because it has a Greek name, that means it's from the rhetoricians. In other words, the enemies of Socrates. So,
right.
There we are. So next time we tell Fiverr, shut up, it's polysyndeton.
Right, we're cool. Yeah, and honestly, that leads into a lot of really cool stuff, and we can talk about this next portion of the discussion next. Is, like Ezra mentioned, catching all of the things that we do, versus, keeping things that are stylistic and that we do like, and we're intentionally breaking the rules because that's something that we love. Like I remember reading Salman Rushdie's Midnight's Children for the first time, and he has this one paragraph in that book that has no punctuation for like an entire segment. It's just on and on and on and on. And it was like, it blew my mind as a young reader. I was like, wait, you can just do that? Like, that's crazy. So when we're talking about editing, what are things that you all struggle with the most that you really rely on other people to help catch when you're working on your drafts? And then what are things that you are really proud of, catching and you found that you've improved via self-editing because, that's kind of it's up to us really at the beginning of it is to try and catch these things or
Bummer.
leave the things that we like. So I don't know if there's anything in particular that you all struggle with.
That's the human element. That's the cool thing about the human element is that I ended up having to deal with some things that I didn't know were a problem. Um, just recently, I read on the conversation.com where they ran a test where they got some editors together to edit a short story versus what Chat GPT was doing. And they made it very simple. Hi, Chat, can I please ask for editorial suggestions on a short story I'm going to submit for publication? And interestingly enough, Chat was unable to find out that the story was already published and attributed to an author. So it raises the question as to, can this thing even identify plagiarism?
Hmm.
So
It can. Yeah, it
so there's
can.
that thing, and it all seemed to fall apart later on during the rewrite. It did offer some sound suggestions on dialogue, foreshadowing, so forth and so on. But it did offer some. It kind of went too far during rewrites. And one of the things where it messed up was it changed all of the Australian um, English to American English, which is the writer was definitely not trying to do. So it was making changes on its own, whereas a good editor actually just offers changes that the editor thinks should be made. So that was kind of a thing that they had to deal with. And I think that's the crux of it. I think what we're talking about here is using AI as a supplemental tool, but the human element cannot be ignored. And here's an example of that. In my book, my fantasy book, it's got a strong superhero element, and Batman is Bruce Wayne. So if you say one word, say one name, you know what the other one is. I was operating on that. My characters are not as well known as Batman and Bruce Wayne. So my editor was like, there are times when you say sleepyhead such and such, and then you say Dexter such and such. That could be kind of off-putting to the reader. And I was like, oh, okay. Wow, I never even thought about that. That was not something that was crossing my mind. How do we fix it? And she was like, I suggest that whenever we're in action scenes, we use the code names, and whenever we're not, we use the real names. So it's things like that that I think are
Hmm.
integral to this entire process.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I had, someone I hired off of Fiverr, and this person was transgender, and they just made so many different things that I wouldn't have even known. They said that's really offensive. Or like I had something in my book that the players get handicaps, and they said that could really offend some people. Let's call them glitches. And so I renamed like throughout, like they just said all these things that like I didn't even realize were offensive. That was the best money I ever spent was on that sensitivity reader. But I had people from all different factions, of different racial groups, whatever, to make sure that I wasn't really, and I had really like a quandary, should I use certain words? Because I have Nazi characters, and I'm like, that's the way they'd really talk. But do I want to use that word? And in
Oh,
one
wow.
particular sequence, I changed it completely based on the feedback, and I had someone observe what they were saying with better words because it was just too I didn't want my book to get banned,
Hmm.
and I never wrote that before, so
That's a great point to be aware of your own blind spots that you have in your own experience
mm.
and and find people who know that experience you're trying to write about best, and that's only going to make your book better and more authentic when you do that, and I think that's really important to acknowledge.
Yeah.
Yeah, so now oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, okay, yeah, I'll just jump in really quick because actually I've had a lot of people approach me about sensitivity editing recently. I'm not a certified sensitivity editor yet, but that's one of the things that I really want to specialize in because I think it's so important. And I think when people think about editing, we often forget we're so focused on developmental and line and copy and proof that we forget that sensitivity editors are actually even a thing. And unfortunately, there are so many authors out there that I think are very restrictive, and they say, well, no, like for example, if you are not a Japanese person, you cannot write a book that has a Japanese main character and have their experience be the focus of the story. But in my personal opinion, and I recognize I'm coming from, being a part of a minority group, but not an ethnic minority group. I am indigenous, but so little so that it's like I was not raised in that way. I don't claim it. So that being said, it's like, okay, how do I handle that as an author, as a very like white author? I was raised white culturally, but I write a lot of fiction. Like my main middle grade series has a black kid as the main protagonist there. I got a black sensitivity editor. Everything worked out just fine. So having authors, letting authors know, it's like, yes, please go find either editors or beta readers that fall within that group to make sure that you're not doing anything offensive, or also too that like they can add in little things that like will make a kid who relates to that experience or who grew up in that kind of household or has that type of ethnic identity, their eyes just like pop because they're like, wow, this is me. And it's like, that's where the joy for me comes from. There are certain topics that I personally wouldn't touch on. Like, I love what you said, Jennifer, about like, it's like, hey, this is like too much. Like, it's too much. So like for me, there are certain stories that I wouldn't tell because it's not my place to tell them, but recognizing where that line is, but then as an author, making sure it's like, hey, even if you have fantasy characters that don't necessarily have any race, like I think about how the Lord of the Rings, like everybody's white except for the orc actors, and it's like, wait a second, like this is weird. And if a sensitivity editor had just like looked at that for 5 seconds, we might have avoided a bunch of really weird stuff. But like, yeah, even in your fantasy worlds or science fiction worlds, that's such an important thing to think about when you're self-editing. So I love that. Yeah, definitely wanted to just jump in on that. That's awesome.
Right. Well, I needed a criminal group for my book. And like, I spent a lot of time in the biker community in Fort Lauderdale. And I decided, and I was watching Sons of Anarchy at the time. I'm like, my criminal group is going to be an outlaw biker gang. So I actually got people like to read my stuff. And I took all kinds of notes because I hung out in biker bars, like how people talk, what they say. But I did a lot of lurking on Reddit to find out specifically. I was curious what a female's role in an outlaw biker gang is, which I learned very widely. But I really, did a lot of research because I call myself biker adjacent. I spent a lot of time in the biker community learning and having people read my stuff for authenticity. That was very important, not to misrepresent anybody. So
I think one place where I was successful with my novel is the thing that said, I'm glad you mentioned it, Tycho, about all the white people in Lord of the Rings. One of the things that I'm trying to be an agent of change about is having a very diverse cast in my fantasy book. Now, in that vein, I have a black main character, and that's fine. But I've been successful where I've had women tell me that they really like my female characters, and I asked them why, and they said, "Well, because obviously you know how to write for women." And I took that as a compliment, but I don't write for women. I think it's very important that I don't fake that kind of funk, trying to act like I am that gender. I am that race. I am that culture or that background. I just write for character. I don't think that I think that's where people might go wrong, trying to take a perspective they know nothing about. I don't write for women. I just write for characters, and I think that's where I was successful. So if it ain't broke, I'm not going to fix it.
I was going to say that I had Alex Temblador on for an interview, who is an expert in that. She has a book about it. And her assertion was that, because I asked her specifically about that, to say, well, my character is an individual person. And she took the view that sensitivity reading is still necessary. So I don't know. We can kick that football around a little bit, and I have no doubt that it's right in your book, Aspry, that you did a good job. There's no question about that. But just as a general issue, do we always have to have sensitivity readers? And of course, we're going to talk about self-editing here. So like, which is where what Jennifer said was relevant to it. Now, writing for characters and doing our own research and versus getting a sensitivity reader, I think is a topic that we may have to find our own solutions to. So I'll just throw that back out.
If
Yeah,
you're not
definitely.
going broke, I say do all of it.
Yeah. Well, for me, again, as somebody who is like, my main focus is to help editors or people who are editing their own work save money. My thing is if you're, including characters that are outside of your realm of perspective, you just don't fit in that identity, but they're just background characters. The plot doesn't focus on them or their identity. It's like you have a side character, for example, who happens to be Hispanic, for example. Cool. As long as you're not doing anything offensive, you probably don't need a sensitivity editor for that. But if you're choosing to write a story, for example, about maybe like a Guatemalan immigrant who is trying to cross the border and escape the cartel, and then they have all of their own social issues that are coming along with that, and then they're trying to illegally immigrate, like that is a much more complex issue, and that's something that like you have to research yourself. That becomes like a whole other beast, and you probably want a sensitivity editor for that at that point, especially if you're not like, if that's not your lived experience, assuming you're like, say, like a white author or somebody who has never jumped the US border to escape the cartel. Like those kinds of things are just like, that would be where I would personally define that line. But that falls into that self-editing thing too, where it's like, okay, I have to make the decision, like, do I need this additional cost at this point, or can I give it to beta readers and have them give me feedback on that? And if they say anything that is like red flag, like, hey, this seems really offensive, or like, why is everything like, it feels like it's all yellow, like in Breaking Bad whenever they go into Mexico, and this is like really, really weird. And like, people, especially beta readers, can give you good feedback on that. And you don't have to pay, hopefully, anybody anything unless you do pay for beta readers, which is a valid service that people offer for sure. So
Breaking Bad has a Hispanic guy literally named Nacho.
yeah.
Yeah,
I love that
I have
show.
not used sensitivity readers. They didn't really exist the last time I was putting out a book where it was relevant. I have just tried to write the characters and love them and do my own research. And there have been times it didn't work out so well. I had one of my books has not a villain, but an antagonist who is autistic, who has a weird kind of Asperger's. And a reader called it out and said, no, you didn't do it right. And then I said back, well, wait a minute, read this part. And then the reader was like, oh, okay. And maybe this whole scenario could have been avoided if I had done it. I was just trusting myself there.
Yeah.
Based on
Well, and
having
honestly,
interacted with people who have Asperger's. And I do have a friend who has it, but it's a much milder case than the character.
right.
So,
Yeah, and like it's all lived experience. And I think ultimately, too, as authors who are self editing, we have to constantly remind ourselves, too, to be kind to ourselves. I've seen traditional published books that have had the most egregious mistakes in them, and nobody has caught that. They're pushing things through the pipeline so quickly nowadays that people, I've noticed a lot of dissatisfaction in readers with big houses like HarperCollins and like Penguin Random House, because their books are declining in quality and things get missed, and not everybody is going to be happy with your book at the very end of the day. Somebody's going to find something and they're going to want to harp on it, or they're going to, like, I guess tropes might change, and a certain age demographic of audience is going to be fine with whatever you've done, and the younger generation may not be fine with that, or there's a miscommunication thing that happens there. And so, like, we have to just know that we are doing our best with the budget that we have. A lot of us are running off of 67 cents in a packet of ramen noodles, and like, ultimately at the end of the day, if we have something that we're proud of and that speaks to our author voice, and we are learning from each book that we put out, I think that's what's most important. And even if we're getting, I would love to talk about the things that we have listed here, like head hopping and dialogue tags, and show versus tell. I think that those kinds of things are more like an educational forum that maybe we could put on later, to talk about tackling these things. But I think ultimately at the end of the day, us as authors, we're writing poetry, really. And I don't think people realize that it's like, yes, we're telling a story, but every single word and every single line matters. And at the end of the day, we sound like what we want to sound like, and so as much self-editing as we can do. Sure, there are certain grammar things that we definitely should not do in order to avoid our books looking like, archive of our own fan fiction that's put on the internet by a 13-year-old. We can avoid that kind of stuff, but ultimately, like, our artistic decisions are our own, and like we just have to be able to put it out, and then just, if there is weird stuff that comes back at us from reviewers, learn from it, and then just, be better the next time we go back to edit, just be better.
Parker, what's your view? What's your approach to using dialogue tags?
So like he said, she said kind of
Yeah.
stuff.
Mm.
Well, I think on the first draft, I don't even think about it. I just write whatever comes to my head. And then on the second pass, it's really just coming through, listening to the music of the words. I always come back to that. Like, that's the instinct I use when I'm editing, is I just kind of read it and hear it in my head. And I either like he said, she said, or I don't, and I'll immediately try to find other options. What I don't want to do is use adverbs to make it better. I try to use different words like when I can, but I want the dialogue itself to reflect how the words are being said. And so I'll catch myself sometimes maybe slipping an adverb in there and like, how can I make this dialogue better, and kind of infer how the speaker is saying it.
I'm just going to point out about the adverbs that if you swap in every place where an adverb might be with a verb that indicates tone, that becomes noticeable also. So, I would say on dialogue tags, using the said tag most of the time, it becomes kind of not that noticeable.
Right.
And the best thing to do is just use that tag, and then to have the language itself, or what I call an indirect tag, which is just the person's action or expression to indicate the emotion. So, just not that I would write this particular one, but I'm not going to let you do that. Dan banged on the table. Right. So that's the way that you can indicate the emotion without saying, I'm not going to let you do that, Dan shouted, or I'm not going to let you do that, Dan said angrily. Right? So the indirect tag is the way that a lot of contemporary writers get around that, and I'm trying to use more of them because it's contemporary style. But it also becomes noticeable if you overdo it as well.
Yeah, it's a balancing act. It's hard, and I think that that's what makes self-editing really difficult. I know my favorite self-editing anecdote about adjectives and adverbs is that Mark Twain apparently used to overuse the word very a lot. He just would overuse it and overuse it. So it got to the point where he just replaced the word very with the word damn, and then would send that off to his editor and just send in a curse-filled document, and then it would be up to the editor to filter out all the curse words. But yeah, that balance is really hard. And one thing that I learned when I was going through my line editing certification was that what's nice about those indirect tags is it allows the reader a moment to breathe. And that can really change the pacing of your dialogue. So if you want to have dialogue also that has no tags at all, and it's just dialogue back and forth, and you just have two people and they're just shouting at each other or something, that's also totally valid too, because it depends on how slow or how quickly you want to push the reader through the scene effectively. But it also has to do with style too. I know Ernest Hemingway was known for being very clipped and very to the point, and sometimes that's that works too. But yeah, definitely just thinking about, I love the phrase you keep using, Parker, is the music of the words. That's where line editing really shines, is it's if you're strong in your style, that'll come to you naturally, but you can just play. That's what we do as writers, is we're here to play. There's, yes, grammar is important, and yes, punctuation is important, yes, proofreading is important, but at the end of the day, we're here to have fun and make something that's very uniquely our own. So playing around with those things can be very cool.
I generally use it. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
All right.
Ezra, I think you offered this topic. I'm curious to hear what you have to say about that.
Oh, thank you, Aspry. Aspry. Jeez, sorry about that.
Ask your wife, man.
All right. So I generally use it three ways. And that is I can have that alternating dialogue. And if it gets lost on who's speaking, the he said or she said is great at being invisible and letting people know, okay, so
Yeah.
who's speaking. And then when it comes to it can be used to pause the moment and show that there's time passing before the person continues speaking, like was already said. And then the third thing is to show emotion. And here's an example that shows both of those two things. So it's like if the original dialogue was, you want me to apologize, I won't do that. And then you have, if you want me to apologize, he grit his teeth and balled up his fists. I won't do that. So that shows a moment of a reflection and also emotion of the emotion behind it. Yeah.
It's the emotion bit. Let me see if I have that one here. I have this one. Is it?
It wasn't say
Yes, the emotion
Push it forward.
thesaurus.
Yeah. The urban setting.
Ugh,
Why am I
yeah.
selling these books? I didn't write.
Yeah.
It's okay. It's okay. We need them. We need all the help we can
Yeah,
get,
I wrote this.
honestly.
Well, I
That's
always
fine.
learned that like you should really, and like you put meaningful action, to, not just direct or not just necessarily meaningful action, but if you are going to use something to identify who's speaking, it should be something meaningful to either tell about their character, their emotion, or some type of action. But like you said, Parker, I think I view it more as like it's like a sculpture or a painting, and it's just like adding layers, chiseling things away. Like you said, like I like your analogy with the music, and this is the way I kind of view it a little bit differently. It's like you're kind of adding and subtracting to make it like have the right shape, I guess, or the right, I don't know, rhythm or beat, I guess. It's a lot of different ways to look at it.
Yeah, you don't want the scene to drag if you're punctuating every word, every spoken piece of dialogue with dialogue tags. Like, yeah, I pay attention to how I want the beat of the scene to play. Is it a little slower and drawn out? Does it need to be fast and quick? Like, and that is all so instinctual in my head. And I'm making sure that I'm not repeating the words and making the experience for the reader redundant or repetitive. Like if you're using he said, she said a lot, then like that kind of lulls the reader to sleep. I think sometimes you need to find some different words to make it pop. But I'm curious, Aspry, like kind of what is your take on the topic? What do you like to think about as you're writing?
I'm in a unique position because I have a fellowship, a team of heroes who are basically out to kill the devil. That's all. That's all fantasy books are about, anyway. And so yeah, if we're in like a round table of characters discussing a situation, I kind of have to. I try to use the tag sparingly, but if someone new to the conversation wants to contribute, you got to do it. I would love to go back and forth. I love the scenes that I write where I go back and forth, and I don't have to do a lot of tagging. And an exclamation point can tell a lot. I think it was Matt who said, a bang on the table can tell a lot. But that's if you have two people going back and forth in a group of eight, then you find yourself in a conundrum where now my hands are tied. I have to do this,
Yeah.
So then you find yourself saying, how can I do this imaginatively? Or how can I do this effectively? And you find yourself having to think a lot more. And I mean, I have 430 pages of that. So there was a lot of work. It was a lot of work.
Yeah. I think Matt brought up a good point of sometimes you can use an action to infer a dialogue tag. So, and I think it also adds to the scene. So if you have a bunch of people sitting around the table and they're arguing, you could say, Jack stood up, and then have a dialogue where you can just tell by the action he's the one speaking. Like a lot of it is just removing the confusion and doubt for the reader as to who's talking. And so I like that approach. And using that as much as possible.
on to piggyback on that, I've done things like that, whereas I had somebody do a line of dialogue, and then I talked about something that was going on in the scene as far as one particular person is concerned. And then I would have the next line of dialogue, and it's very obvious that that person is talking. That's a
Mhm.
tricky one.
Mhm.
You have to like kind of know what you're doing when you do that one. And I learned that one on the fly. I'd never done that before. This is my first novel, and I was like, what if I do it like this? And it actually worked out really well.
That's awesome. That's a tough scene to write. I haven't had a scene like that, but if you have like 8 people in a room around a
I
table
did.
having a conversation, you almost have to think of it as a stage play or something. I'm not sure, but
Yeah.
I've
Oh,
it's a
actually
that's a
done
challenge.
that.
question I have.
I
The
broke
question
into a
I
stage
have for
play.
all of you. Oh, I'm sorry.
I said I just
I was
broke. I
just,
had a conversation with about 10 people, and I just broke into a stage play, stage directions for a while, so they could go back and forth.
yeah. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. My question was for everyone. Do you also, when you're writing, think about how, like I like to do like read aloud and work to see what it sounds like or read it myself, but like as the audio book, is it obvious who's speaking from how you've structured everything? Does anyone think about that when they're
I
writing?
I kind of have that. I kind of have that going, but there are a couple of characters who speak in such a distinctive tone that
Mhm.
you know who's talking. This
Right.
guy would never say such a thing, but this guy damn sure would. You know what I mean? I run into situations like that, and that kind of makes it a little easier.
I think that's the goal, is to make your characters distinctive enough that we should know who is speaking. But right,
I
like
like
so
it.
half of my story is a group of 8 people. And so yeah, I've really had to wrestle with like all the stuff you're saying throughout the whole book. You know.
hmm Yeah, I really like Matt's kind of idea. I think it's kind of fun sometimes to break up the reading experience for the user and just give them something fresh
Mhm.
uh, for the reader. I mean, so like imagine just like starting a chapter and from the very beginning to the chapter, you're reading like a stage play. It's a name and
Mhm.
dialogue just through the whole chapter. You're breaking it up, you're making it fast and fun, and I think that could be effective.
Right.
And
There's
I like
many
the
ways. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
well, actually, bouncing off of you, Jennifer. I like a trick is to remove who's saying what and see if you can tell who's speaking. Um, what is their typical curse word? What is their typical exclamation? What is their typical syntax? Do they use and without any commas? Do they use short phrases or short clauses that are not complete sentences? So yeah,
Right.
those are all great ways to characterize someone's speech.
Yeah, I like that too.
Well, that starts to get
Yeah.
into really like voice, right? And that's where line editing can get difficult. And I notice that a lot
Oh,
of like authors who write in first person struggle with this, especially now that like the romance genres and romantasy especially are very, very popular right now. All of a sudden,
Mhm.
like you're switching between POVs in between chapters, and you have the female love interest and the male love interest, for example, and they both sound exactly the same, and it's very weird. And so all of a sudden,
Right.
you're hearing the inside of this guy's head, and it's like, why does he sound like that? And it's because the author's voice is so strong that they have not really established that voice for each of their characters. So to be able to do that, whether you're writing in first person or in third person, and parsing that out via dialogue, is huge. I think for me, I'm very fortunate in that I have a degree in animation. Actually, I teach as an animation professor at an art college. And so I think super cinematically when I'm watching things move around. So, similar to the stage play example, I'm envisioning where my camera is inside scenes, what characters can hear, or like if an audience was sitting watching the thing as a film, what can
Right.
they hear? What can they see? And then, of course, you add on like, what does it smell like? And all of those things. And then that's where like, the magic starts to happen in terms of like a sensory thing, but that also helps with
Yes.
that camera direction. So it's like if you have a room full of 8 people, where is the camera pointing at? And especially if you're doing like a third person limited perspective, that person is sitting at the table watching things happen around them, and so that camera is naturally only going to look at one place at a time, and so you're not going to omnisciently know like things that are happening outside the building because the character's not outside the building, they're sitting at the table, and so they're only going to be able to perceive that, you know.
I think that's a great advice.
Yeah, I just want to add, I did alternating points of view for exactly that reason because I have one character who's like kidnapped, but she wouldn't know the perspective outside. How's the world reacting to it? So I made this whole other storyline to show what's the world's reaction to these kids all being kidnapped, so I could show two totally different perspectives of the story. I love playing with different like ways to present stories, like there's so many ways you could do it. And I thought that worked well, made it a whole new thing. So
I think that idea of a camera can really help with the head hopping as well. If you think of it in terms of what character has a camera strapped to their head and how are they seeing the world, that can help you like pick moments. Well, like if this was a movie and the camera was strapped to somebody's head, then like how would they know, that piece of information that only another character would know? And like I think that's actually a good editing technique is thinking of it in those terms.
Yeah, I always tell my authors, I'm like, literally strap a GoPro to the front of your character and then leave them alone. Like, they'll be okay. But that can also, too, help with, any kind of weird things, too. Like, I know Jennifer had brought up, like, this character looked or this character heard. And instead, if you're really like, I think that's what people struggle with. It's like to put yourself in the character's shoes. It's like, okay, well, what does that mean? And it's like, okay, well, if you were actually standing in the exact spot, what are you hearing? Or what does that sound like? If it's a noise from a cafe, is it a low rumble? Is it a roar because people are rioting outside of the cafe? Like, that's going to change the tone of what's going on. And that'll help also to clarify for the reader and really immerse them into that scene.
I was going to jump into something here. I just made this. This is the filter words. I think that's what we're talking about here.
Oh yeah.
A lot of people talk about this on TikTok, and so I generated this list of filter words so that I can start checking to see if I was overusing them or not.
Yeah, great.
So I think that's probably the terminology that we could be used to look for these. And I'm not prepared to have somebody on TikTok tell me that I can't use them, but I don't think it hurts anything to find where I'm using them and consider whether I want to keep them or not. So
well, that's really the
words is the
core.
term, yeah.
That's exactly it. Is that I love the word that you use specifically there is the word consider, right? And that's the core of editing is like, especially even if we as authors get editorial feedback from a professional, so to speak, that is not set in stone in any way. And even if we pay somebody, they give us feedback and they tell us that we need to change something, that's not up to them, that's up to us, because ultimately we are the artist and our opinion of our own artwork is valid. That's the really like why we're doing this is because that's who we are. Sure, someone can tell Michelangelo that he has to draw a god, not buff. But like, did Michelangelo listen? No, he didn't. And now we have buff God in the Sistine Chapel because he didn't care. He literally did not care. So that being said, like when we are making these edits, that's super important is to just, when we see something that we know is strange, ask yourself, do I need to change this? Or is it okay to just leave it? Because sometimes that's the answer. And that's also too kind of where I think editing with AI can get kind of tricky, and it's exactly what Aspry brought up earlier, is it's like the rewrites start to get insane, where all of a sudden it's changing and it's changing and it's changing so many things that probably could be left alone, but human editors will do this too. Some line editors especially are not very well trained in respecting the author voice and respecting the vision of the original work, and so they will make suggestions that are wild, and they don't follow your tone, they don't follow your voice. They're not realistic for your plot. They don't follow what the character would actually do. And it's really just their own personal opinion of what they would do if they were writing the book. But it's not their book. It's our book. So like you can ignore those changes. And then if an editor keeps doing that to you, just like let them go. Don't use them again.
Sometimes you have to ignore those changes because if an editor can make a sound correction or a sound change, but only you would end up knowing whether or not it should be changed. For instance, my last editor, she made a very good suggestion, but I had to reject it because I said, no, this has to stay because it plants a seed for the next book. Things like that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, you're the CEO of your story, and
Yeah.
I think that's important.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I was gonna say I got some feedback though about my book from my critique group that I wanted to ignore. I had to kill my darlings. Everybody was so upset about something that happened right in my first chapter. They said this is going to become the focus of your book. And I had to like completely take out this whole subplot because even though I loved it, they were right. And I wrote something I think much better, but I still really love the old story, you know? But sometimes, you know, even though it is your choice, you kind of have to listen. When every single person said, wow, killing a child in chapter 1 is really upsetting, I had to listen and I didn't kill the child off in chapter 1.
I
So,
think that's a very good lesson because the concept of the editing process in itself being a very humbling experience. You find that in some cases you're not as smart as you thought you were, or you're not as creative or awesome at this particular thing as you thought you were. You thought you were writing something amazing, and it might have been great, but you know what? It's probably better without it. And I found that out the hard way. Um, Several times throughout the 600 pages that ended up becoming 430. I was like, wow, man, you know what? This is my hubris it needs to be deflated here. You know what I mean? After a while, I start to just accept that it's probably better the way she said it, and I'm just going to go with it. And I think it's a juggling act. I think I was right half the time.
Yeah. Well, and that's something that's really important to think about when we are self-editing too. And I always encourage my authors to be armed with the knowledge of their genre as well, because I've been writing, for example, a couple of thrillers recently, and I don't read a lot of thrillers, but readers expect thrillers to be very fast. They want them to be punchy and explosive and in your face, and you're through it in what feels very, very quick compared to somebody who writes predominantly fantasy is what I focus on. And so those readers want lush descriptions and to take your time and to enjoy the scenery and the descriptions of the characters and the magic of the world. And as soon as you recognize that those two genres are completely different things, that can dramatically change how many words you have in your final document and those darlings that you need to kill. I had like a 140,000 word science fiction thriller that I was thinking about marketing as hard sci-fi or speculative sci-fi, and then I realized it was more of a sci-fi thriller, and then I had to drop that to 98K because that was just how that went. You know, and you get rid of a lot of stuff that you realize suddenly is unnecessary, and it's just kind of dragging your story down. And so knowing those things beforehand can save you a lot of grief. Where you're not spending so much time building things up to try and effectively dump in as much information as possible. Sometimes short and sweet is the answer. And if you want to include that information later, we as authors have the ability to publish novellas that are in the same universe as our stories and publish prequels and publish sequels. And we can really do whatever we want. So if we wanted to write it later, we could, and no one can stop us. So
I think I like that. I think, Jennifer, maybe you mentioned earlier creating distance between your drafts. And I think like that, that is really helpful when you want to kind of feel how where the story is like dragging. Or I know I'll put away my draft for like a month, like especially the first draft, and then come back to it. And you're amazed at how much you forget about what you wrote. And so like going into it feeling like, oh, I'm kind of experiencing this as a reader because I forgot how I wrote this or how I did it. And you can like find chapters that like are really dragging or things that don't work. Like I guess my advice is like give yourself some time to forget what you wrote and come back to it fresh. And that'll really help you make things better.
right.
What's everybody? What's everybody's views on tenses? I was wondering.
Oh, I love present tense because I write thrillers. I want it to feel immediate. Now it's happening to you. That's like, I guess it depends on your goal for the story and how you want the reader to feel. But like I set my book, and one of the compliments I got on my book is it really feels like it can happen tomorrow. It's 5 years in the future. It's 2030, and like, AI has exploded and all these things. So I think it depends on your goal of the story and how you want people to react to it. So.
I always write past tense, except I did one present tense. I did a novella in present tense. I thought it came out extremely well. I was trying to channel Hunger Games, which of course we know is in present tense, because I was also writing about different type of teenagers. I thought it did work extremely well. Present tense encourages the reader to feel right up on the action in a different way. And so it depends what kind of effect you're trying to produce. I think you can pretty much use the one that feels right. I don't think there is a specific rule about it. But in general, if you wanted a rule, it would be present tense for immediacy.
And
Yeah.
not to give away a spoiler, my book was originally called One in Vermilion Will Live. Then that's telling the reader someone survives. And like, if my book was past tense, people would know someone survived. I don't want them to know. I guess I just kind of said so, and there is a sequel. So how do you even handle that when the outcome's supposed to be a surprise? But I think the tense also matters with what you're trying to create, a surprise.
I'm guessing the one approach is to figure out what will not draw the reader out of the story. And I know that, or I say that I know, but I don't really. That the tendency for YA is present tense. And then for general fiction, simple past tense. And but in my experience, when I start reading something that's in present tense, like the Hunger Games, and I'm so used to reading the past tense, it just jars me for like a couple of pages or so, and then I can get into it. So I wouldn't say that it's anything to worry about. So yeah, that's my 2 cents. There is a trick I want to add, which is like if using simple past and you refer to something that had happened, there's something where you use the word had, he had done this, and you use it twice, and then you go back to simple past, but now you're in the previous memory framing, and then when you jump back out of it, you use had once. So it's like, if you
Yes.
remember the time when he had washed his dishes and had been approached by a salesman, the salesman said, "Your dishwasher sucks. You should get it replaced." And he said, I don't want you in my house. Get out of the house." And that was the time when he had decided he did need a new dishwasher. And so he went and did get a new dishwasher. So I managed to use, had twice, and then went back to simple past, used had again to get out of it.
Yeah, exactly. The past perfect tense constantly is very obnoxious. For those who yeah, the past perfect tense means it happened before a past tense verb that's nearby it. So you can stick in by the time he had X by the time he did Y, right? So if you have a whole paragraph of that, it becomes very distracting. So that's why I agree with you, Ezra. You use a little past perfect to transition into the flashback, and then you go to something like a past tense narration or something, and then have a signal that you're coming back to the through line again.
Yeah, I definitely agree with everything that everybody's saying in that I think it's just very personal. For me, I have the misfortune of having been in like a high school English program that required us to read a lot of European fiction, and so I read a lot of Gothic literature in high school, and it's still one of my favorite genres. And so, for whatever reason, my brain will not leave that, and I write like Robert Louis Stevenson sometimes, and I don't know how that happens to me. So present tense for me is very difficult for me to handle. But I agree. I started writing an experimental thriller that's more of a superhero thriller recently, and present tense is the best tense for that because the whole story centers around this guy's mental breakdown as he's trying to create a life-saving drug. And when you're experiencing very trippy things happening because you're taking substances that you're making in your kitchen sink, like Walter White, those things, having the reader be in that moment is going to be more effective if it's in present tense. But other things, I think it's all just very personal preference. I think I've personally seen an even blend of past tense and present tense for younger fiction, like for YA and for middle grade, and especially for middle grade. If you're writing it for anybody younger than like 13, I think past tense is the standard as far as I understand for like series of unfortunate events or like Coraline or those things, because I think the kids are, I don't know. And like, again, it's personal preference. There could be authors out there now who are just completely shifting the narrative in that way. And which is why it's so important to read within your genre when you're working on stuff currently. Because if you're, working on a thriller and you're not reading a thriller, then, you might not understand or know what the common trends are. And if people pick up your work, they might say, hey, like, I would like this to be in present tense because I think it would just be more fun. And you can pick up on those trends sooner rather than later. But if you have a personal style, and that style happens to be in past tense for most of your work, that's not necessarily a bad thing, I don't think, in my opinion.
If you talk about personal style, I think that's where I come in, trying to make sure that my speakers are in the present and the dichotomy of the past tense writing is kind of like a tag team going back and forth. I do that on purpose. I just think it's cool. Um, and if I don't even know. I would have to reprogram my brain to write the whole thing in present tense.
Yeah, it's rough. I find paragraphs even when I'm self-editing, because I'll go back, I'll write a chapter, and then I'll read it aloud afterward to make sure that it has that nice flow that I'm looking for.
Mhm.
And every single time I'll have a couple paragraphs of present tense and then a single paragraph in past tense. And then I have to angrily go back
Yeah.
and make everything present tense. And then I keep reading and I'm like, why did I do this to myself? Like I had a perfectly good choice to be able to do this in past tense. And now I'm just torturing myself for no reason. And I don't know why, but it's a fun experiment, like, I guess that's all we can do, just like play around and experiment.
Let's do one more topic and then we'll schedule a second session like this for a different day.
Cool. Awesome. Well, I think a lot of people were talking about, and I know we kind of mentioned it earlier, intentional versus unintended sentence fragments, comma splices. I know we were talking about the and and the and and the and, those kinds of things, editing those out versus keeping those in. How does everyone feel about it at that point? When does it stop being stylistic and when does it start to become a problem? When is it intentional versus when is it just really annoying to read? And then how do you catch yourself when you're doing those kinds of things?
I think Jennifer mentioned it earlier. I was halfway through book one, and I was like, how many times am I going to say and? And it got annoying. I was annoying myself. And I was like, I want to like my writing. I don't want to have a problem with it. And so then I forced myself to open up and broaden and say to myself, well, Aspry, there's other ways of doing it, man. Why don't you just use those other ways that you've been writing since you were 15, freaking 52. So, it was just one of those things where I just had to kind of snap out of a doldrum. And, like Parker said, maybe it would have been easy for me to just do it on the first draft and then go back and see things that I wanted to fix. That's probably actually more medically beneficial. It's probably healthier for my brain and my heart. But I want to do things right off the bat. And I wrote my first book working off and on for 10 years. And the second book took me 6 months, which is just amazing. So the stuff was just falling out of my head. And it actually it made a difference in my writing to already have the wherewithal to go, don't put and right there. Do something different. You know what I mean?
But you taught yourself to
Yeah.
write by writing your first novel.
Basically, yeah.
It's amazing
But
how that happens.
But I think it's kind of true for me too, in a way. But that's a story for another day.
I think it's true for everybody. Like, I don't know a single author who doesn't look back at their first novel and go, like, why did I do that? Like, that's nasty, but that's okay. I would rather, and like, some people are better than others. Some of us are more graceful. Like, for me, I published my first novel when I was 17, and it was in the early days of Create Space before Amazon bought it, and it was bad. It was so bad. It was really, really bad. So thankfully, you can look back on those things and say, hey, I learned a lot. And now when I go forward, I know what stylistic things I like to keep and like what is just absolutely annoying. Like Aspry was saying, is like, I don't like it that. So why did I do that?
I had quite the quandary in my book because I have a lot of biker characters, and one of my main characters is Snake, and he's a biker kid. He's 16-year-old biker kid. And at first I like wrote him very like speaking very eloquently, and one of my critique partners was like, he wouldn't talk like that, and neither would anyone in his community. But I'm like, then I like wrote it all biker speak, and I'm like, well, that's like really annoying too. So I really, had to kind of mix the two to make it not, they call it like, what do they call it? Like writer's fatigue or something, where you're using something too much and then nobody gets the meaning because they don't want to read it because it's annoying. But I really had to like change this whole dialect, and not just him, but all the other biker characters in my book. And on my first draft, that didn't even occur to me, but it wouldn't sound right if they spoke normally, quote unquote. So I had that.
Oh, on the same accord, there's a book called The Curious Incident of the Dog in Nighttime. I believe that's the name of the book. And the character, not to sound insensitive, but I feel like a jerk now thinking this way years ago. But I just couldn't get through the book because I didn't like the way the character talked. So that's a thing too.
Yeah, the character has autism, right?
Huh?
The character has autism, although interestingly, the title is copied from The Hound of the Baskervilles by Arthur Conan Doyle. But that's where the title comes from. The character has autism, and that's why he has an unusual perspective.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, and then that brings up again, it ties back into the topic that we mentioned earlier, where, I don't, unfortunately, I don't know if the author who wrote that book in particular was autistic themselves, right? And so then is it just the way that is it the way they think autistic people sound, and then it becomes inauthentic,
right.
Just like Jennifer was saying, where it's like, now it's inauthentic and annoying and probably offensive to people who are reading this and going, hey, I don't like this. I feel like that way a lot when I read some books by authors who are writing kids lit. I'm like, have you ever talked to a child in your whole life? Like, why does this child sound like a 48-year-old man? Like, I don't understand what's going on. But yeah, it's a great point though, and like trying to figure out intentionally when is too much is really, really hard. And I think reading it aloud is really the only way. Like, I know Jennifer mentioned, like, how would it sound as an audiobook? It's like it's the only way that you can really catch those things beforehand to make sure that you're not doing the same thing over and over and over and then being really annoying with it.
And it's totally fine to have a character have different syntaxes. There's moments when if the action in the story is low, then it's fine to have long sentences that drag out. And then if there's action moments, to have short sentences, subject, verb, object, just completely short, one after the other, like bullets. And yeah, so if you have a character who's taking the elevator, I walked into the elevator and waited up there thinking about my day and how I really should have bought that flower for my wife, and really it would have been a better experience had I done so. And leaving the elevator was not as interesting as when I opened the door and found a jaguar crouched at the couch. It flipped its tail. It was watching me, checking my every moment. I moved one step forward. it moved one step forward. No.
Yeah.
The reader fell asleep.
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, and I can absolutely see what you're saying because you've effectively got a choice to make there where, you're having regular everyday things happen and having longer and softer sentences, and then all of a sudden that action starts happening and you want to literally blast the reader through being attacked by a jaguar as you're coming out of the elevator. And so having those clipped sentences, and then even as was mentioned here, because that Matt brought it up, those intentional sentence fragments. I see a lot of contemporary thriller authors doing this too, where they will start a sentence with "and" or with "but," and that'll be the first word, but I didn't know. It's like, oh, I got it out. And that can really change the whole tone of the scene where all of a sudden it's like, ooh, things are happening really, really fast. And that can be a fun way to use that intentionally.
Mm-hmm.
I would love it if there was a tool that you could just run your manuscript through that would basically have an AI read it, or something that's has a very lifelike voice. Like I think Adobe Acrobat PDFs, you can turn on like a reader assistance tool that will read your manuscript to you, and so you can hear it, but it's very robotic.
Yeah, the text to speech is awful. It's so bad.
So I
I know.
haven't found I haven't found a free tool or a low cost tool that might do this, but I would love it if I could just like close my eyes and have a very lifelike voice read my
Well,
book to
I'm
me,
gonna
and
give
I
you
feel like
one.
I could catch a lot
Yeah.
of stuff. I can't
Par-
pay my wife
Parker.
enough to do it for me.
Parker, the iPhone, if I email myself chapters, and
yeah?
then your iPhone will read you your emails.
Oh, that's
So
cool.
if I have a chapter and it's emailed, then I can listen to the chapter that I just wrote while I'm driving to work.
Oh, see, there we go. That's what we needed. That's a hack.
Yeah.
I put it in Word. I like Word's voice better. There's one girl, she sounds really realistic for my female characters. So I do what you said, Matt, but then I
Nice.
upload it to Word in my iPhone. I think it's even better, honestly.
I didn't know about
And I
that.
do it while I'm driving too. Yeah. And
that's
like
great.
people who say, "Oh, I don't have time to read your book," I send them the instructions for how to do this so they can't make
Yeah, it's like, please just text to speech the PDF. I promise you're gonna love my book. No joke. Yeah.
This has been a wonderful experience, and I think we could go on for hours, but probably we shouldn't. So
Even one more.
let's say we're going to do this again, we'll try to come together again, the same group we have now, or we'll also invite other people and see what happens, so we can talk a lot more. So we'll call that like the technical self-editing discussion, to continue what we've already begun, because as we start to work through particular concerns that we have, we're getting so many different ideas on them. So Tycho, you want to summarize this and get us out of here?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think we did a great job. We covered so many things, everything from how to find editors, what to do if you don't have editors, how to save money finding editors, and then of course all the little things that we individually as authors were each dealing with, our own things that we find in our own manuscripts that just are annoying as all get out, and we don't know what to do with it. So, everybody's got their own things that we're dealing with. But definitely thank you so much to everybody. It's great having such a wide variety of genres and age ranges as well, because that changes a lot about how we edit and what we're looking for. But yeah, it was great hearing everybody's perspective, and thank you so much for contributing to the discussion. Good luck with everybody's books. We got lots of debuts and some veterans too. So everybody, hopefully, everyone go and support all of these authors, please. Everybody hold up your books. Yes, hold up your books.
Can't see it. Mine's like fading out.
Yeah, I know, we're all blurry. That's okay.
I have a
Everybody go
new
support
cover
books.
that's behind me anyway.
Yes, go support all these authors and check out everybody's work. And hopefully we will see you next time for this next forum.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank
In the
you.
spirit of holiday,
Enjoyed it, everyone.
eat and spend money.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much. I'm going to end the recording and we can chat for a second. Yeah.
Cool.
Okay.